All right, got some folks coming in here. We'll give folks a couple seconds to join the webinar here, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Excited for this. Happy Wednesday, everyone.
Yes, happy Wednesday.
Had to think there for a minute.
Great, just letting folks have a couple seconds to jump on here, and then we'll go ahead and get the show on the road here. Great. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome everybody to the Humans of Customer Success Community Hour. This is hosted by Quala. Today's topic is our leadership panel on building and scaling customer success. We have some great folks on our panel. I'm the moderator. My name is Mike Redd. I'm the CMO here at Quala. I'm joined by Jenna Kluger, who's manning the chat. Please do feel free to put your thoughts, questions. If you're hearing something that resonates, pile on in the chat. If you've done something a little bit differently, pile on that too. And of course, get your questions in there. If you want a private question, you can click on the Q&A, and that will go to the moderator here. And then we'll, in all cases, try to get to as many questions as we can at the end of the session. So want to start out with introductions from our great panel here. So we'll just go around the virtual room here. I want to hear from everybody your name, your current role, your current company, what stage your company is right now in terms of the customer success journey. And we'll do a little bit of an icebreaker since we're talking about building and scaling. What is your favorite building? You can get nostalgic, you can get historic, you can do something kind of fun and eclectic. So whatever comes to mind. And folks in the chat, feel free to add on your favorite building too. Get some energy rolling here. So let's go ahead. Who wants to be the brave first soul to make an intro?
I'm fine to do that. I'll be the sacrificial lamb. Hi, everyone. I'm Sonciary or Sansi. It's good to see everyone here. Again, I don't know how many community hours we've done, but it's always so much fun putting them on. Co-founder at Quala.io, the sponsor of today's event. We'll talk a little bit about Quala in a moment. But as for me, I've been in customer success now for about 12 or 13 years. And it's good to see everyone in this growing community. I've worked with many of you. I see you in the chat saying hello. And let's see. One of my favorite buildings. And what stage are we at? So Quala is an early stage company. We're building customer success tech, I mentioned, for CS leaders. And let's see. My favorite building, I think, is the chapel. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's the chapel that's set in the mountains in Sedona, Arizona. I think it's called Chapel of the Holy Cross. It's absolutely beautiful. It has the best view of sunsets out in Sedona. So I would say that's my favorite.
Very cool. All right, let's go around the room here.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to jump in. My name is Kim Rose. I am the Senior Vice President for Customer Success for a company called Notarize. Notarize is in a hyper-growth mode, having been spurred on by the pandemic. We allow online notarizations. So for customers, real estate lenders and title agents, or just consumers, you can log into the platform and get a document notarized online through a video, audio chat. So super cool tech. I joined about 4 months ago. And so we are in that hypergrowth stage. And I would say my favorite building has always been, it's been influenced by my dad, but it is Falling Water, Frank Lloyd Wright, and even went so far as to get my dad a Falling Water Lego kit years ago for Christmas. So I love it.
Very cool. Exciting.
Happy to jump in. Jim Coleman, the VP of Success at Parsec, which is now a part of Unity. I've been in CS proper for about the last 7 years at companies like Badgeville, Caldas Cloud CX, and Tatango. I'm agnostic now. Prior to that is, a long stint in enterprise tech doing professional services or consulting or solutions architecture. So, properly in sales for about 7 years, but the whole career has really been in the same sort of thing. Parsec is scaling up rapidly. We're growing quite a bit. Be tripling our team in terms of the CS function by the end of the year. So I'd say we're in the scaling mode right now. And the favorite building, the one that sort of sprung to mind, there were a couple. The Vatican, the Hagia Sophia, some of the old religious architecture, especially the larger ones, Angkor Wat and those. And I think it's just really kind of amazing and inspiring what can be done with purpose and effort and coordination. Things that can be lasting and enormous at scale and still have a lot of beauty. And especially considering things that can be done by hand, right? We're all in tech, but it's still amazing what people themselves can actually do if we have the right direction to it.
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool. Awesome. We'll round it out with Simon.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon. I am the Director of Customer Success at CampMinder. We make a platform that supports summer camp operations, off-season, parent engagement, the whole thing. It's a very fun and exciting community to serve. I've been here at 5 years at CampMinder. We were bootstrapped for a very long time until recently, and so we have grown pretty organically, and now we're looking to scale further without increasing headcount. So that's kind of my challenge right now, is streamlining operations and freeing up time for meaningful activities. I'm going to go fictional for my building, Avengers Tower in New York City, the home of the Avengers. That works for me.
Nice. That's great. And I am actually finally working through all those Avengers movies. That's been my my quarantine hobby, I would say.
That's amazing.
Great. So I'm going to give a quick intro on Quala, who hosts Human and Customer Success, and then we'll dive in to all of our great discussion. So, as I mentioned, Quala, we're a customer success platform. We're unique in that we're powered by frontline intelligence. So we get all of your great customer data all in one place, and we layer on context from what your frontline teams are learning. So conversations you're having with customers, that allows you to trigger some really great triggered workflows right within Quala to help you onboard, retain, upsell at the right moment, serve at the right moment, get ahead of at-risk situations. So if you're curious about it, check us out at quala.io. There's also a blue button at the top of the screen here. If you want to learn more, a member of our team will reach out. So enough about that. Let's dive right into our first topic. So first topic here will be about building customer success, right? And so the first thing I'd like to do is we're going to do a poll on, you'll see this in the right panel here, just to get a sense for where the community is as far as building customer success. So in your current company, are you in a building phase, a scaling phase, or are you optimizing? So we'll pop that poll up, but we'll keep the discussion rolling throughout. So looking to the panel, as you think about when you're building, a customer success function, what's your most important bit of advice that you'd give to the community? And we'll build on that throughout. So who wants to jump in first?
I'll go first here, Mike. Yeah, I think for me, the thing, my advice that I would give is make sure we'll fight for that kind of customer success as an important function of the business, and making sure people understand what it actually is. My biggest fear, and I tell my CSMs this a lot, is that you leave CampMinder and your resume says, I was really busy, but I can't really tell you what I did with my time. And so making sure that the company is aware of the impact that the team is making and what customer success is for, and making sure that is really well defined. I think that's something I struggled with when I first started, and it was like, are you advanced support? Are you inside sales? What are you doing? And making sure there's really clear definition there, and that the company is aligned on what our function is.
Have others faced similar challenges, what Simon's outlining there?
Yeah, absolutely. What I have done in my last few jobs is, certainly in my first 30 days, articulate to the company what my vision of customer success is, and that's been really important for me. And it has been true in my time at Notarize. The first thing I did was sort of establish this customer success North Star and share it across the company, so that we could all talk about why we're doing what we're doing. It sort of sets the context for why am I having the conversations that you have to have down the road with product and sales and whatnot. So I definitely feel that. I would also say, for starting out, number one priority is understand the customers.
Mm-hmm.
Start by day in the life. What are we solving? What is the value we can bring? It starts with, what do we understand about the customer's pain and the customer's journey, and what their why is, right? Why did they buy it? They signed a contract or they clicked on the button. We need to really understand that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely. I think again, that sort of statement of purpose and what constitutes success internally is the biggest problem. A churn issue is the biggest problem. A growth issue is the biggest problem. Customers don't know how to use our product issue, and being able to sort of knock that first issue out. And I think that also helps to prioritize how you're going to interact with the rest of the company. I mean, one of the things I love about the job is the fact that it touches every single part of the organization. But there's some places you're going to coordinate a lot more frequently than others. And it's important to know who those are and define that working relationship as early as possible.
That's great. And how do you get that coordination right when you're building up, the function? It's, might be a new entity to some.
Yeah, I think it's, the most important part is finding your peers in the organization, like who else on which departments, and how do their teams work? Are there any overlaps? Are there things that, as you build out the CS function, that you can evolve some of that work into CS or some of that work out of CS, whatever the right model is for the customer and the company. But I think having that tight coordination of your management team, trying to establish good personal relationships there as well is pretty important.
Yeah, I would add on to that and say these are all great points, that I've described CS in the past at other companies as the beating and bleeding heart of the organization, and maybe less emotional. I might say it's just the center cog of the wheel, because we have such close connections with our customers. I love, Kim, that you mentioned, day one, understand what their why is, what they're struggling with, what they're winning at, and let that be your declared purpose as a team, and then champion that declared purpose with not only the customer success team, with your actual customers, but with the greater company as well. C-suite. I mean, everyone needs to know that there has been a purpose that has been declared. Not that it can't change. Sometimes we hold to those things very loosely, but that we're all fighting for something very clear and specific. And that's going to help direct how we spend our time and the goals that we create for ourselves, and again, for our customers.
That's great. That's great. And so what if we were to flip that on its head, right? So we talked about, some keys to success. If we can snap our fingers and go back in time, with lessons learned, things that you might have done a little bit differently or approached a little bit differently, when you're building up that CS function, what kind of things come to mind?
Yeah, I'll jump in just because it sort of builds on Jim's, which is don't underestimate the value of the cross-functional collaboration that you're really going to need to do your job well. It's very easy, and I have seen it, where customer success takes on all the burden of, I have to figure out how to make the customer successful. This is my problem: happiness, satisfaction, success, value. That's all my problem, and it's not. Right. I had this conversation with one of my team members this morning. It's not. It's a collective company. We are just, on the front lines, much like a support team might be. We're driving value in different kinds of conversations, but ultimately, it's the job of a collaborative relationship with product, a collaborative relations with sales, with marketing, with everyone within the organization. So, I think a mistake folks can make is being too siloed in their thinking that, I'm responsible for the customer. The whole company is.
That's great. That's great insight. So why, whether Kim or others on the panel, why do you think that arises in the first place, right? So how do you make sure you're ahead of that? Is it just making sure you're identifying, like, here's my partner in crime, as Jim was alluding to, and whether it's marketing or product, what's the best way to get past that fast?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about getting collective alignment on what the role of customer success is, and buy-in. So if our North Star is empowering our customers to get the value out of out of the product, and delivering that value in these proactive, outcome-driven conversations, I take that I need buy-in from product to say, I'm going to get some feedback. Do you have a mechanism for ingesting that? Let's work together on that. Similarly with sales, I'm going to try to make this customer successful. Can you're my partner in this, and making sure, sales and CS is a topic in and of itself, but making sure you're aligned on ultimately successful customers is the goal. Great. Now, let's partner to get there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the context and alignment that really helps.
Yeah, I think off what you're saying, Kim, as well as, data should be unbiased and tells a story that it takes out the opinion of it. And to form those relationships with sales and product, I've found my initial mistake was jumping in and being like, we're going to treat our customers this way and we're going to do these activities, but without bringing in a system of measurement to say, here's the impact of what we're doing, here's what we're hearing, and being able to deliver that to product in a meaningful way. So my kind of watch out here is to make sure you are collecting the right data so you can look back and say, here's what we did and here's the impact it had on our business, or it didn't have any impact and here's what we learned. But bringing in a system of measurement, collecting the right data, so you can communicate through data with those other teams to take out the, to remove some bias and kind of opinion-driven decisions.
Interesting. Does that data note ring true for folks? And what kind of data are you really looking at on a day-to-day, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter basis to help drive those decisions?
Yeah, the first one that I'd actually rolled out was here at least was an immediate automated feedback. Right, we just need to start hearing as many people as possible, and that wasn't necessarily because we weren't having conversations with customers. Right, we always do, but again, starting to shift from customer stories to customer data is a big step, and you need to have both. But the the story helps put context around the data, and the data helps sort of prioritize which stories are the more important ones. But that was one of the first things that we did, and I don't think you can go too early with that. Whether it's engaging with top 50 customers one-on-one, or whether it's rolling out something like feedback or NPS or just a general census, whatever makes the most sense, and then trying to keep that up. Like that's one of the most important things, and it's really easy to drop off if you if you take your eye off of that.
Very interesting. So I think go ahead.
I might add to that. Obviously, the idea of data points, like hard data points, like usage data, and story narrative data points is something near and dear to my heart. I think all of us in CS know that being good at customer success or amazing at customer success is both art and science, and it takes those gut-based decisions, again, based on your expert last 1 year, 2 years, a decade in the field, along with the data that you are pulling in as far as exactly how customers are using your platform is a magical way to truly understand what is going on and what's at the heart of how they see the value of what you're providing. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here because we all know that both things are important. And I would say that, as we've seen a trend over the last several years of a movement towards a radical focus on data and exactly how customers are using our technology, that it becomes even more important for us to understand the why behind the what. And that's, it's a powerful way to really understand what motivates our customers and how we can work alongside them.
Yeah, so I love that. So let's talk about, the customer success managers and their role in, getting that customer first insight. How do they help build these kind of nascent customer success functions? So let's roll with that thought a little bit. If you were to sit down with a new customer success manager, whether or not they're new in role or new in that particular function and a CS function that's growing, what advice would you give to those individuals to make that customer success function overall really powerful?
As quickly as possible, get into your customer's world. A day, I said it earlier, but a day in the life, like truly understand, empathize, have that shared, maybe gone are the days of site visits and things like that, but try to figure out how you can shadow your customer to really understand what they are what they are challenged with, because what they say may not always be what they mean. And so, we've seen this in a variety of different ways, but bringing, I've had customers who just say, I know I need to adopt technology. If you actually there, it's like you're understanding what you're really trying to do is increase efficiency and lower the mess and reduce the overhead and do all these kinds of things. So then I can bring that back to you and really bring you value by saying, actually, like I've noticed, I hear inefficiency in your process. Let's talk about that. It gives you a good place to start.
That's great.
I have an offering that might help people. It's helped me. This is not my idea. Actually, Chelsea Darby, who's in the chat, worked with my co-founder as well at my previous company. And he would always say something that's lodged in my brain is something the exception or the rule. And the Quala team hears me talking about this a lot. When you're getting so much feedback from customers, whatever type of data point it might be, I think especially when you're building a team and when you're scaling, it can be drinking from the fire hose. So an understanding of this piece of information that I'm getting, is this the exception or is this the rule? Because if you're going to focus your time, you only have so many arrows in your quiver, you're going to have to focus on the rules and the exceptions, unless it's an exception for a very large enterprise partner that is going to sort of like use their weight to make sure they get what they need. Look for the rules, and the data can help you understand what those rules are so that you know where to focus your time. That's helped provided. We've talked about North Stars and guiding lights for me as I think about how to use time appropriately, knowing that we just never have enough.
Yeah, and this, I think, building on it, this is one thing I actually really like to do, even in interviews, is, let's say you join the team, you're going to have 10 huge customers, or you're going to have 100 noisy customers. How do you start to break that apart? What do you start to do? What's your plan of action? Like even asking them and working on that plan. I think especially in early stages, it's critically important to have people that you're bringing on, your first few hires are ones that also understand the process and the discipline and the why, not just of the value that you're bringing to the customers, but how we do, what are the tools that we have, segmentation, prioritization, are they process driven? Are they relationship driven? What's the right tool to use given your book? And are they even asking questions back around the nature of what you think you need as leading the organization? So I think it's really important to again, sort of early on, to have people that really understand the tools that they have above and beyond just focusing on, like, not just, but only focusing on sort of one point, one customer. As you said, what's the rule? How do you find that rule? Is, I guess, what I'm trying to allude to, is you find people that understand how to find those rules.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
And I think with Jim talking about prioritization and how you're going to break that apart, also hammering home that there's no perfect activity that you can take next. There is hundreds of great activities that you can do, and they're all going to provide value. But not getting into that fear or paralysis of, well, what if I don't do the right perfect action for the right client next? There just isn't that option. So pick one great one and do it and deliver some value. I've always found that is important to hammer home early on.
That's such a good one, Simon. Mike and I talked about this just yesterday, actually, the old adage there's you have your way, I have mine. As for the correct way, it does not exist. I think to your point, there's a lot of pathways. You just take one.
Totally. The worst choice in some cases is no choice, right? Making that your de facto choice, just getting jammed up on that. So this is great. So we've talked a lot about, building that customer success function. I think many of you in your introductions talked about, the scaling that you're in with your current businesses. Would like to turn more to scaling, right? And think about, as you're scaling up customer success, are those challenges different? Are they similar? And maybe what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing now? And we'll glom on that as a panel and see if we can get some good thinking around that. So what challenges are we facing?
There's an easy, well, not easy, but there's one that's more easily solved today. And that's, I think, Simon, you were talking about this. How do we scale up with assets and not people? right? How do we pull together all those assets and get them sort of organized and to our customers and users the way we need them to? I would say the flip side of that is, one of the biggest challenges, you have to start recruiting yesterday, right? Recruiting
right.
and team development is one of those things that, especially now, it's hard to find. It's hard to find people, right? And the recruiting process is challenging, and it's great to meet that problem, or to need to work with that problem. But I think one of the biggest things that I've been very lucky to have dealt with, some amazing recruiting partners, internal and external, and using them, building that partnership again early is really, really important, because there are some things that just won't scale with tooling or with content, and you'll always be behind needing another person. It's always just a little bit too late. So getting that ready, and getting the sourcing ready, and understanding what kind of people you need and how to welcome them into your team is it always feels like it's too late. So that's one thing that I think is important.
Right. And you broke that into two distinct challenges, do you think, Jim, or they really go hand in hand, the scaling of assets and also the scaling, of the right team size?
Well, I think you have to do both, right? I mean, there will always be the need for some level of high touch. I think you can do quite a bit with scaling. On our side, we have two very distinct chunks of the business. Some of them are extremely high touch, and we have a lot of customers that are in that, I don't need a phone call more than once a quarter. I'd love to have it once a month, but whatever that number is, they're going to use a lot more of those scaled assets. And we're also never going to have enough people to say every single customer gets an onboarding CSM buddy in order to help guide them through that process every time. So, and people don't always want it. So I think you have to have both, because you have to be able to engage the customer in the way that they need. Selfishly, it's a lot cheaper to build assets than it is to go through building and developing people on your team, but you have to do both. And I think my point on the team side is that it always feels like you're a little bit behind unless you're super on top of things very, very early.
Makes a lot of sense.
I'll jump in to kind of build on that with Jim. My current challenge, or the challenge that I was sort of faced with joining Notarize, is, the team grew so fast. Overall, the company grew so fast that it was. I guess I have two challenges. One, we had a really hard time. We're transitioning from reactive to proactive, and that's an area that we're really focused on, because the growth was so fast, and our support organization was not able to keep up from a hiring perspective. So CSMs took a lot of reactive support burden, and so transitioning that conversation is change management, not just for the CSMs, but for the customers. And so working through, that whole, changing who we are to our customers and what they can expect from us is been a real focus of a lot of our conversations lately. And then the second bit I would say is we had a one size fits all, just do whatever, everything kind of mentality. And so defining segmentation and defining, where do you draw the lines between, your enterprise, most strategic customers, all the way down to your sort of low touch, tech touch customers, one-to-many programs. And so we've arbitrarily drawn lines based on what the data is telling us now, but I fully expect that as we lean into the service that we're giving and our customer, we start to understand a little more about what our customers need and who they are, then we'll be able to really refine those segments and then assign an engagement model that's appropriate. But those are our two big things: is shifting the conversation and then defining a segmentation model that is appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very similar, Simon, to what you said before at CampMinder, right? So finding the right actions and just doing something, right, and not getting locked up, right, and having a plan about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And with redrawing those lines that Kim's talking about, some of our clients have been with us for 20 years now, and resetting expectations as you go through that process, I would say that is a definite challenge. Is treating people one way at the start and then realizing that over time that is not scalable or doesn't make sense, or we're moving away from different things. I think that is a particular challenge for the CSMs, is delivering those conversations with tact and grace, and getting the message across. I think that's always going to be an ongoing challenge as we're looking to grow and scale.
I would say separate but connected this conversation around scale. There's a framework that someone gave to me that's been helpful as you think of the specific problems that you're trying to solve, and the goals that you have, is to focus on 3 different things. Is it a people, process, or platform issue or opportunity? And to be very careful not to try to solve a people problem with a platform, or a platform or process problem with people. And the way to think through that is to first just be aware of the framework and know that there are different tools in your bag that you can use to get to the goal, the scale goal that you have. And as you're thinking about those different things, if you want to invest in technology to help you, if you want to take a look at your process and you're like, oh my gosh, the customer success process is just broken, I need to fix it. Or maybe you're like, I'm just so understaffed, I need people, is to think about what's going to get you sustainably to your goal as quickly as possible. I think a lot of us try to think about how to get there as quickly as possible, and we don't think about the sustainable component. And I do feel like sustainable growth is what we want to be focusing on. Of course, because you burn bright, but you burn out. So that's something that's helped me in the past, as I think about what are the 3 key areas that I can focus on, and what's the correct one for the opportunity I'm trying to solve for.
All right, I love that, and that especially I think connects to what Jim was saying on recruiting takes a lot of effort, and it's hard to find great people. Right? It's a competitive market out there. That's great. So we spoke on the building session about customers and understanding customers and getting some of that feedback, and of course customers are at the center of customer success. Love to hear your thoughts on how does that change, or does it change from when you're first building a customer success team to when you're in this rapid growth and scaling? You're making some of these harder trade-offs on high touch, low touch, or high touch, less touch. How does your approach to getting that customer input change, or maybe it doesn't change?
I can chime in. I might answer a slightly different question,
Sure.
Mike, but where my brain is going is the moment that I think trips people up is trying to do it the same way from a very early new team and company to a scaled version. So the answer to your question is I think it has to be done a different way. And really at the crux of it is understanding who are your strategic customers. Are you aligned as a business around who are you prioritizing? Because as you grow, if you grow from 10 customers to 20,000 customers, you simply cannot do that the same way. And you have to get disciplined about who are you listening to? And do you all agree that you're listening to the right people? Great. Now let's figure out a path for that feedback, because that's where the hard conversations come in, especially when you have a lot of sort of low touch or even tech touch customers who want to provide feedback. It may be voluminous, but it may not be strategic. So I do think it has to change. If you only have 10 customers, you got to listen to everybody. But once you get to the thousands and tens of thousands or more, it becomes impossible.
Yeah, I mean, my background biases me towards having some kind of platform in place. I think I've always and I don't know, I wish I knew who said it, but there's the quote that you see every once in a while that talks about you rise to your culture and you fall to your systems. I think it's important to build from a foundation of some level of process and platform, some level of tech touch. And again, that can be your service desk, and it can be your knowledge base. It can be, for things like customer feedback. Like I said, I tried to roll out that feedback mechanism really, really early and keep it going. Right. So I think there's some mistakes of like, oh, well, we're gonna do a big NPS survey out to all of our users. Great. You're going to launch 20,000 NPS surveys. You're going to get 5 to 10% back. And then the most important part of that is following up. Like, are you talking to the people that, are you doing something about that? You send them an email, you talk to them if, like you said, if they're important enough to the organization, if they're strategic enough, but you have to do something with that response. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So for me, the thing I was trying to do was like, how do I send that out to 100, 200 people a week? If we have, X thousand users, we can't answer that all. There's no way any one person will be able to do that, or any 5 people will be able to do that. So I think it's important to do that, because now, at least, like you said, some of the quality may not be as rich or on target as we want, but there's always something there, right? Now it can always fall back on, even if there's not enough time to go out and meet with 3-5 customers a day this week, there's still some feedback coming every single week that we can do something with.
Yeah, I'd say especially. Go ahead, Simon.
I was just going to say, and delivering that feedback to the right places and collecting is important. I also like to make sure that I'm sharing the positive feedback with the company as a whole. To most of our companies, we have a lot of happy, grateful users out there, and so giving joy to the engineers and the product team and the accounting team, so they can actually hear, like, look at the impact our platform that you might not necessarily see every day, sharing that message that has helped us with our employee engagement, having people buy into our mission. And it's an easy thing to forget, right, is to share those wins and to make sure that kind of that story is coming through, as well as just delivering for product improvements.
Yeah, I love that. And it really builds on, I think what, many folks are talking about on the building, right, is creating that alignment and creating that cross-functional, right? Because if you don't have that foundation, then whether it's good feedback or not so great feedback, that's really hard to do if you're starting from scratch and haven't built that. Sansi, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, connected to this question, because I see some comments in the chat. Zach, Mayor, Catherine talking about how much time is spent from a CS leader perspective with actual customers, whether it's on calls or in front of them versus with the team or on strategy. And I'm curious to know from this group, how do you think about your time, and how much of it, do you have a rule of thumb of how much of it's spent actually in front of customers versus with the team, or working on the business versus in the business?
As much as we can get away with.
Yeah.
It changes every week. I don't know that I have a hard number on that, but
yeah, I'm with Jim. I think strategy and team development, talking to the customers, are my 2 biggest priorities all the time. I don't feel as though I can adequately represent my team or the customer or the desires of what we're trying to achieve if I'm not living in front of the customers as well. So I actually spend as much time as I can in front of customers, talking to them in meetings and QBRs. They almost all have my cell phone.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't think I have a full breakdown, but I will say 2 things. One, it's important to get your team's input on what that breakdown looks like for their workload in particular, and making sure that you're coming up with attainable but challenging goals with them. And number 2 is making, really driving home of having integrity when you do set aside those times to work on the business and strategy, is having integrity to those meetings and not moving those around. So making sure that you are, it's an easy thing to push back, but it's like, are you going to have that integrity to yourself and hold that space and do what you said you're going to do? And I think that's really, really important.
That's great. So I'd love to break out the crystal ball, right? So we've talked about building, we've talked about scaling. For all the great work on customer success, it's hard to imagine that it's still a pretty nascent function, right? In many places, and it's evolving, at least every 6 to 12 months. I'd love to hear the panel break out the crystal ball, and if you think 18 months, 36 months from now, how does customer success continue to evolve, right? We've talked about customer success in the middle of customers. It's certainly in the middle of many other functions within the business. How does it change? How does it evolve over the next, call it 3 years, 2-3 years?
I'll start with more money. I'll throw that one out there. That's always a good one. No, for us, like, getting the right information to product and and then really being able to deliver that back to the customers. I think that is just an ongoing challenge, and finding better systems and processes on how that all works together. In particular, measuring very small features against very giant, big new features, and how do you weigh those against each other, and making sure you're still delivering on those everyday small upgrades that improve usability, as well as delivering the new growth features and the new pieces. I think I would love to see product and success become closer together over that next period.
I agree with that, Simon. We call those paper cuts because it's really hard to find room for them in product roadmap and advocate against feature requests and other things. However, paper cuts can be really, really painful, and so we have to advocate for a swim lane for those things, and it's a challenge. In a perfect world, 18 months from now, do we solve that? I don't know, but that would be pretty cool. The other thing I would say is, I think it will be I don't think we're there yet, and maybe challenge me on this if you think we are, but I think CS leadership will be a presumptive part of a growing executive team for starting companies, and it hasn't been. I think we're close. I certainly think in 18 months or so, we will start to see among the first hires in an executive organization for a scaling company, a CS leader.
Yeah, I think we're going to. We've been making this move, right? It's becoming a lot more obvious in recruiting cycles, in communities like this where we're able to have much better interactions with our peers. I think we're coming out of the religion of CS, and it's starting to become a lot more professional. So yeah, we're going to see people are going to start to understand what it means. Like the number of times that I get asked, well, I've never worked with a CSM, like what do we actually do, is still higher, but it's also noticeably less than it was a few years ago. And I think that professionalism is going to be is going to drive it to become a lot more common in ways that aren't, I've got a churn problem. We need somebody titled CS, slap that Band-Aid on and they go. And then in 9 months or 12 months, the problem's not fixed because it wasn't something that was core to the business. And we bring in a new person and it wasn't fixed. And we bring in a new person. I think that, coming into that real professionalism and seeing it become a lot more common is going to be the big thread.
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo all of that sentiment. And I also love the religion of CS. I think CS for CS sake is really being tested in a good way. We are a nascent field. We're not necessarily as developed as a marketing motion or a sales motion. But I think what I'm noticing more and more is CS teams are, you mentioned, Simon, like money. We are going towards the money in a good way, meaning we want to understand what exactly is our ROI and what business impact from a growth perspective can we drive to have a seat at the table, so that we're not just having to siphon off platforms, tools, and team members of other teams because we can't advocate and get the resources that we need ourselves. And I see that is already starting to shift with the rise of the chief customer officer, which continues to go 70,000 CS roles that are open on LinkedIn right now. It is just growing like gangbusters. And I feel like every time I talk to someone, they're talking about either they're moving to another company because they saw a pretty lucrative opportunity, or they have team members that are moving around. So there's a lot of excitement that's going around in the field. And I think for us, what it means, in addition to figuring out what our ROI is and our value is, which we already know, I should say effectively communicating that, is how do we solidify standard playbooks that drive towards that growth across company stages and all types of segmented customers, which is what Kim talked about a little bit earlier. And I'm frankly really excited about it. It's time.
Right. I mean, it's such a powerful intersection of, it's at that point of customer success where value is delivered, right? And you're getting that feedback back from customers on what more value could be delivered or is not being delivered at the moment, which is really at the heart of every business, right? You got to deliver value and meet a need, right? It's kind of the fundamental business precept, right? Cool. So if that's where we're going, if we had, some magic wands or magic potion of your choosing, if you could snap your fingers and have something be so, in the CS world in 18 to 36 months, things come to mind that you would magically have happen? This is a real thinking question here, because I brought out the magic wand on this one.
It's a good one, though. I thought of it more in terms of on a micro level. I don't know if anyone else did. Specifically, what would I want for Koala and our team and how we work with our customers, not necessarily on a global scale. And for us, very, very focused on how does ongoing education work at our company. So we have a clear focus on onboarding. We want to make sure that we're delivering at a velocity that makes sense to that our customers want, in a way that everyone loves. They love us, they love our products. But what does that actual education communication look like after onboarding from a scale perspective, not necessarily one-on-one education? So if I had a magic wand, I would have all the resources I ever needed to build a world-class, kick-ass education team that could focus on just letting everyone know about everything that we're building and why we hope it matters to their business.
Yeah, my wand moment would be just a database with all the answers I need from 18 months from now today. Of, all the touch points measured, all the voice of the customer stuff coming through into one place, all the product metrics in just this single funnel. We're obviously pursuing that, but getting that ready and actually having it in a really deliverable way. That I think is just like, then we know. It's like, instead of guessing, are we doing what's right? It's like, we know what we're doing is right. We're building the next best thing. So whether that's a magnifying glass or a microscope, or I don't know, I would wish for that.
I'm in the same boat, Simon. I think we grew so fast that the foundation is coming second, and so we need to build the foundation that is inclusive of all the data visibility, all the metrics at our fingertips, knowing how it's difficult now to know for the CSMs to understand how to prioritize their outreach, how to understand customer health. We're building that now, or attempting to build it now. 18 months from now, it will be built. I'm hoping by the end of the year it will be built, but it's that foundation in combination with fixing the influx into a product, and getting those a way to elevate the paper cuts, are two big priorities for us.
I think for me, and this is totally unrelated magic wand, but I think the learning better some of the techniques from marketing and growth, and having the zero unsubscribes from emails, right? That sort of thing. So how are there completely, totally seamless ways to interact with customers the right way, the right time, knowing what those are and being able to act on them, I think would be, for me, the magic wand, because there's always the challenge of, well, how do I engage, or how do I re-engage, or how do I get the message, or how do I hear from them? But that will be my magic wand, is having that solution completely solved, and there's just complete and total seamless communication.
Great. Well, we're jumping into Q&A. I see a great question just came through on the chat that's tied to at least the marketing thread, and I know Kim, you mentioned a little bit earlier. Would love to get the panel's view on. Let me see if I get the question right here. A little too far back. So Rob Kagan mentioned his magic wand of better alignment between sales, promises made, and the onboarding team. He said just wrote an article on the subject. So we'd love to get the panel's thoughts, right? So how do we create that tighter alignment between sales and customer success?
Yeah, I think it starts foundationally at shared goals. I think sales and CS need to have shared partnership in getting new customers, signed up and all the way to a defined point of value. Whether that point of value is engaging with your product in a certain way. For us, we have transactions, and so until a customer in a sales process has committed to a number of transactions, the sales rep is aligned from a compensation perspective to ensuring that they get to that point, because that's the commitment that's been made in the process. And so they work as a partnership. I think, most of the friction can come where goals are not aligned, and in particular, goals around compensation are not aligned. And I think really it starts at sales leadership to be aligned with CS to say, are we in agreement that a successful customer is what we both want? Great. Now, as that funnels through, and when we find areas where perhaps, a feature was been glossed over or whatever, like, do you have the open lines of communication, building back to what we kind of started with, was how important these relationships are. Do you have the relationship to say, like, this is something that's been coming up, we need to work on it together?
Yeah, I think as well, just telling sales what you need in terms of the information coming through in the sales process. We used to sit down with them for 10 minutes after every sale and chat with them. And then the big step we took, which seems simple, was actually writing down a list of questions in a sales note that they actually have to complete before it goes to the CSM, of like, what does success look like? What potential roadblocks are there? Are there any personality issues with the customer we should know about? Where do they want to be in a year? What is there any future growth? So telling them, like, we actually want to know all this information at the start, and just having it written down so we can both go back and review it. It's like, well, here's what it looked like at the start of this, has actually got rid of almost all confrontation, because everybody's aligned, and just moving that away from verbal to actually having it there, as well as you can report on it later and measure some good trends. That was just a big thing. And, sales was really open to, like, yeah, tell us what you need and we'll collect it. We'll get it for you. And that can be kind of a fearful step sometimes, but it was really beneficial for us.
We do something similar and take it a step further, but the culture of our organization is that we talk a lot about information, not ammunition. And we use, basically, we create assessments in our own platform where then we rate the lead that came in, or we rate the customer from a specific set of criteria, I think, or 4 questions that help us get an understanding of the quality of the customer that's coming over, but also what their potential success is on the platform. And honestly, it's just areas where we're going to, again, kick butt in areas that we want to look at, to know we want to make sure we improve in. And then we pass that information over to the sales team. And then we take it as a CS team to know, okay, here's where we're starting and here's where we want to end up. But again, it only works because it's information, not ammunition. We're not pointing any fingers. We're not shutting anyone down. We're just knowing, here's where we're starting and here's where we want to go.
Great. So I have a thought-provoking question here in the Q&A. I'm thinking about the answer to this myself, so I'll see what the panel says. So it's a thinker, right? So we might need a second on it. The question is, does data collection follow what your CS team structure is, or does the data you gather speak to how your CS team is already set up, right? So it's a little bit of chicken and the egg of what comes first, how your team is organized or how the data is that you want to collect.
I think you take an educated guess first and go with your gut and then measure it. I think that's why your team and we're in these positions, is because we do have good intuition and we do have a good sense. And while you have nothing, I think your best guess is better than waiting to collect data. So I would say trust your gut, but make sure that you measure it. And if it's right and it's great, that's awesome. If it's completely wrong, but you learn really valuable lessons, that's equally as powerful as picking the right thing.
I think it also depends on which data you're talking about, right? So I think if we're talking about things like product data, feedback data, anything like customer stories, I think that's all stuff that you collect in whatever form you can get it, because more often than not, you're limited by, you have like a physical limitation. Like, product can't return it, or I don't have anything in place, or I can't, I only have one person to make these phone calls. But if we're talking about data around the process and the effectiveness, I think, to Simon's point, that's something that you definitely evolve over time. Like, there are a few things that just, like, you're looking at base retention, you're looking at net retention, you're looking at time to value for onboarding. You're looking at adoption rates. Okay, those are great, but those aren't going to define your organization. The 1 or 2 layers down from that will, but you're not going to know that out the gate. You'll have some guesses, but it won't be anything until a year and a half in.
Right. Yeah, that definitely rings true. I mean, even from some of our customer conversations, how even the notion of health scores have evolved, right? There's a push for health scores, which is really important, but then also then the components of those health scores, and then some of those leading indicators within the health score become even more important than the health scores themselves over time, is triggering the right work, right? So very interesting. Great. I have one more question here in the Q&A, and then I think this might be our last one. So this one hopefully pretty straightforward. So we talked about building and scaling. How does the CS staffing ratio change in those different growth modes between small, enterprise, and strategic accounts, or however you might kind of break down the different segments of customers you might have?
I'm happy to jump on that. I think some of it is you have to identify what your first problem is, and then you have to be willing to adjust that assumption, right? So I think there are times when it makes sense if you have a very service focused role. The things the customer needs is it's responsive help. Maybe it's not like reactive ticket based help, but the thing that you need to solve right now is you need a bunch of people to help engage customers, right? Period. You need to do that. Other times, that you're going to have growth to plan for, and maybe it's more important to try and find, maybe not a manager out front, but somebody who can help you act as a player coach to bring other people in, right? So I think that it's going to depend. The ratios. I mean, we've all heard the, $1.5 million to $2.25 million or whatever it changes every now and then. And that's a perfectly fine rule of thumb. And it still seems to bear out, at least in my experience, as a starting point. But, I'm talking to CSMs that have $20 million books, or they have, 1,000 or 2,000 customers. So I think it all depends on, like Sansi said, you've got your people, you've got your process, you've got your platform. What can you support? What do you need to do in order to deliver? Having a starting point is just fine. And I don't think that anyone would argue with taking, as blunt as it may be, that $1.5 million as a starting point and adjusting from there.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you touched on this in your answer, Jim. I think it's, also the complexity of the product that you're working with and the maturity of your audience to handle it. And so if you're tackling a maturity curve thing where you're not just bringing, a sort of an obvious product or service to your customer, but it requires more education and more supporting and enablement materials, you're going to want to have a smaller book of business, because it's a much deeper conversation and far more strategic and less transactional. And so I would make sure to factor that in as well.
That's great. Well, everybody, thank you so much. We're right up on time here, just about at the top of the hour. I want to say a huge thank you to the panel. Some really great insights here. So thank you so much for giving the community this hour of your time. So on behalf of Quala and Humans of Customer Success, thank you, everybody. We will be sending out a blog summary as well as the video in a couple days, so you guys can check all of that out. If you do want more information on Quala, feel free to look us up at quala.io, or you can email me at mike@quala.io. And thank you again for a great session. Some really, really good stuff. And thank you so much for all the engagement on chat. That is really awesome to see. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike.
Thanks all. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.